Hello all and welcome back. In the last video, we learned how to read and write data from a worksheet. In this video, which is the first part of the series, Understanding UserForm Objects, we will learn how to write data to a worksheet using a user form. We will be accepting inputs from a user and then we will insert that data into the user form. In the next video, we will learn how to read that data, modify that data, delete that data, and other things. The user form lets you create professionally looking graphical user interface with which you or the user can interact easily. VBA also lets you place several controls with which you can not only input data but also read data from a database or a worksheet or similar files which are compatible with Excel. It also gives you access to a lot of events and properties which helps you in creating a brilliant application. So let's begin. Let's launch the Visual Basic Editor. If you're not sure what Visual Basic Editor is, then I recommend watching the video Visual Basic Editor and Introduction. We will press the shortcut key Alt F11 to launch the Visual Basic Editor. To insert a user form, right-click on the VBA project. And under Insert, click on User Form. By default, the form has a very small size, but you can expand the height and the width of the user form using these handles. For example, if you want to increase the height, you can do it this way. If you want to increase the width, you can do it this way. Just press the left mouse button and while it is pressed, drag the border of the form either towards the left or towards the bottom. When the user form is active, you will see the toolbox. And if this toolbox is not visible, or if you close it by mistake, don't worry, you can make it visible again by pressing Alt V X and you'll get the toolbox back. I'm going to drag it and keep it here. Let me close this again. Alternatively, you can also make it visible by clicking on the View menu and then clicking on Toolbox. You can place the controls from this toolbox on this user form. We will come to that in a moment. This is the title bar. By default, it has the caption user form and then followed by a number. You can change this as well. For example, you may want to show your application name or a short name which gives a fair idea as to what this user form is all about. And this is the close button. You can click on this during runtime to close the form. If you click on it right now, nothing will happen. On the left side, you'll see the properties window. This property window gives you access to so many properties. Let's understand a couple of them. You know what? Let's tweak them at the same time. In this process, we will create the final form which we will use to demonstrate reading and writing to the worksheet. So the first form that I want to create will be to write to the worksheet. This is the names property. You can set the name of the user form object here. I prefer naming them so that just by looking at it, I know what the form is all about. Let's go ahead and give it a name. I'll call it FRM input. The next property below is the back color. You can set the background color of this form here. So let's change this to white. I have a particular theme in mind, so I'm just following that. Below that is the border color. This property should have actually been below border style because even if you change this color to, let's say, red, nothing will happen on this form. It is only when you set the border style to single can you see the color. See how you can see the border here? So I'm going to set this back to black, what it was, and I'll change this border style to none. I don't want any borders. The next property is the caption. Here you can specify what you want to show on the title bar of the user form. We will be accepting employee details from a user and then we will update the worksheet. So I'll call it employee details. There are so many properties here which we will not cover as we will not be using them. And if I try to cover each one of them, this will turn out to be a 3 to 4 hour video. So we are going to leave many of these properties. For example, the next property is draw buffer here. I'm not going to cover this because this specifies the maximum number of pixels that can be drawn at one time as display repaints. Default is 32,000. This property can be set only at design time. That means you cannot set it when the code is running. This is usually required when you are using high resolution images. Since we are going to use very basic controls and images, we can ignore this and similar properties. The next property which you may be interested in is the font. Here you can change the font of the user form. So if you click on this, you will get the font dialog box. You can change the font name, font style, and the font size. I always recommend setting it to at least 10 points. And the reason is very simple, because if you try to share this workbook with a Mac user, and if you set the font style as 8, then it will be very small on a screen. So if you keep it as 10, then both users can have a comfortable view. So I'm going to set it as 10. I will keep the font as it is. Feel free to change it to whatever you want. Ensure you do not choose a font which is only available on your PC. Use the font which is shipped with Windows. Tahoma is actually a safe font to use, so I'll leave it as it is. You have height and you have width at the bottom here. You can either put values here to change the height and the width of the user form, or like I mentioned, you can use the handle to resize the form. I'm going to resize the form to this size, and then I will later on resize it to whatever I need. Once I place the controls, then I can resize it. The next property that we will use is startup position, which is here. This sets the position of the form on the screen when launched. There are 4 settings you can choose from, which is manual, center owner, center screen, and Windows default. Manual is no initial settings specified. Center owner means center on the item to which the user form belongs. And when you choose center screen, it means center on the whole screen. Windows default, this positions in the upper left corner of the screen. So I'm going to set it as center screen. Let's launch the user form to see how it will look on the screen when launched. Click on the form first and then click on the Run Sub User Form button, or simply press the shortcut key F5. When I run this, this is how my form looks. Let's click on the Close button. I'm going to move this toolbox this side. The small dots that you see on this form is the snap grid. When you add a control to the form, it will automatically get aligned to the rows and columns of dots. By default, you will always see these dots. As mentioned in my video, Visual Basic Editor and Introduction, you can switch these off by clicking on the Tools menu and then clicking on Options. And under the General tab, you can uncheck Show Grid. I would recommend that you leave it as it is. Do not uncheck it. There are 2 main ways to place a control on a form. Let's say I want to place a label. So you can either left click on the label and keep the mouse button pressed and then drag it on your form. This is one way to do it. The other way is to click on the control and then leave the mouse buttons. Do not keep any button pressed. Drag your mouse over the form, you will notice that the cursor changes to a plus sign. Now press the left mouse button, and while it is pressed, draw the control on the form. And once you're done, leave the left mouse button. So this is the second way of placing the control on the form. Let's say you clicked on the control, and when you bring your cursor over the user form, you decided not to draw that control. In that case, don't worry, simply click on this button which is called Select Objects, and this will deselect the control. I'm going to delete these 2 right now. There are many controls on this toolbox. I will explain them one by one as I use them. I have a specific design in mind for the employee details user form. So let's follow that. The first control that I will place is the frame. The frame control can be used in many ways. The most common use of frame control is to group controls related by the content. Or when you're using option button controls, I will come to that later in the video, then you can use 2 different frames and you can place them and they will work exclusively. However, in this video, I'm going to use the frame control for aesthetic purpose. I'll delete frame 1 from here so that the caption disappears. and then I'm going to increase the height and width of the frame, and then I'll drag the frame here like this so it looks nice. So when you run this, this is how the frame looks like. Okay, I will close this for a moment. Next, I will place a image control. I'll increase the size of the image control. I'll make the back style transparent. Adding an image control is optional. It's up to you whether you want to add it or not. I'm doing it just for aesthetic purpose. I have certain images saved on the desktop. I will be using that for demonstration purpose. To change the image of the image control, click on the picture and browse to the image. So I have it on desktop, employees, and I'll click on open. Next, I will change the size to stretch. Once that is done, I will just make this slightly smaller. So I know that this is the size that I want. Now I can resize my frame and the user form so that it looks exactly like I want it to be. Perfect. Next, I will place a label. I will change the back style to transparent. And the caption that I'll give it is first name. I'll bring my cursor on the bottom right corner of the label, and you will see the cursor changes to a double-sided arrow. Simply double click on the border and it will resize itself. Next, I will place a text box. I'll resize the text box. You remember we set the size of the user form to 10. Now all these controls will have size 10. So if you go to font here, you will notice it's size 10. If you click on text box, you will notice the size is 10. So all the controls where you can add text will have a size 10. I'm going to copy these two and I'll paste it again. And I'll drag it right below the first name. The first name here will be now last name. Now we have the first name and the last name. The next thing that we want is date of birth. So I'll copy this and I will paste it again. And I'll change this to date of birth. So I'll have to increase the size, and now I'll click all these and I'll make the size smaller. So you will have to keep on experimenting till the time you are satisfied with the look of your form. Let's say the next option we want is gender. So I'll copy this label and I'll paste it here again, and I'll change this to gender. The next control I will use for this purpose is combo box. So I'll drag and drop the combo box here. So this combo box will have different options: male, female, others, etc. We will set the value of this combo box at runtime. You can also set this combo box from a range of cells. We will not go into that at this moment. So what we will do is we will set the values of the combo box at runtime. I'm going to run this form and I'll see whether it is looking fine. Okay, I'm happy with it. I don't have to do much changes. I'll close this. Now, after the user has put some inputs, we would want to save the data. So what I'll do is I will add a command button. Either you can change the name of the command button here and directly say save, or do something interesting. I'm going to delete this and I'm going to change the height and the width of command button to 50. And then what I will do is I will show an image in this user form. So I will click on picture. The first button that I will select is reset. Once this is done, I will copy the control and I will paste it again. I will drag it and I'll paste it here. I'll paste it again. Okay. The second image will be for save. I will use the third button for exit. Once this is done, I will arrange my buttons. So I will select all the three buttons. Next, I will click on format and group. Once they are a group, then I'll go back to format and I'll say center in form horizontally. Once this is done, I will right click on it and I'll ungroup it. So if you run this, this is how your form will look now. So I will close this. Now let's give some relevant names to the controls. This is first name, I'll call it TB, F name. The reason why I'm giving these names is because when we write our code, it'll be easier to address the text box, and we'll also know what each text box is for. So this one will be TB, last name. This one will be TB, date of birth. This is a combo box, so I'll call it CB, gender. This is BTN for short form for button, reset. This one is BTN save. This one is BTN exit. Now since we do not have captions for these three buttons, so let's use the control tip text. The control tip text property lets you give users tips about a control in a running form. This tip appears when the user briefly holds the mouse pointer over a control without clicking. So let's set the tooltip. We'll start with the reset button. So I'll click on control tip text and I will type reset the form. And then I will mention something which is shortcut key Alt R, and I'll press enter. I will explain what shortcut key is in a moment. For save, we will set the tooltip as save employee details, shortcut key Alt S, and for exit, exit the form without saving, shortcut key Alt X, and we are done. Now let me explain about the shortcut key. The shortcut key can be set using the property Accelerator. The Accelerator property allows you to specify a shortcut key that the user can press as an alternative to using a mouse. To designate a shortcut key or an accelerator key, enter a single character. So if I go back to reset, in Accelerator I can type R. If the value of this property contains more than one character, the first character in the string becomes the value of accelerator. Similarly for save, I will set it as S, and for exit, I will set it as X. Right now we can't test the shortcut keys as there is no code behind these buttons. We will test this later. The next important property worth mentioning is the TabIndex, which is this one. The TabIndex property sets the tab order for individual controls. So when you press tab, depending on the tab order, the next control takes focus. This is usually required if you have not placed the controls in a sequence. Since we place the controls one after the other, the tab order would be in a sequence. So if you go back to, let's say, text box here, you will see that the tab index is 1. For last name it is 2, then we have 3, 4, 5, 6 and 7. So if I run this form, you will notice that the focus is on first name text box, and that is because the tab index is 1. If I press tab, see the cursor moves to last name text box, and then to date of birth, then to gender, then to reset, save and exit. So let me close this. Setting the tab index in a sequential order makes operating the form easier with keyboard. Till now, we were running the user form using the run sub user form button. Now let's add a module, and then we will launch the user form from a procedure in that module. We can also assign the procedure to a button on a worksheet so that at a click of a button, we can also show the user form. I've spoken about running a macro using a shape or a form control button in my video, how to record, edit and run a macro in Microsoft Excel 365 for Windows. So let's insert a module. To insert a module, right click on the VBA project and then under Insert, click on Module. I'm going to reduce the size of the properties window because now we don't need this. We will create a procedure called sub launch employee details. To show the user form, we will use the show method of the user form. The syntax is object.show modal. The show method syntax has 3 parts. Object, which is optional, is an object expression that evaluates to an object in the applies to list. If object is omitted, the user form associated with the active user form module is assumed to be the object. Modal is optional, but it is the default value. I'll come to that in a moment. This determines if the user form is modal or modeless. The setting for modal are VB modal. The value of this constant is 1 and it sets the form as modal. This is the default value. VB modeless. The value of this constant is 0. This launches the form in modeless mode. The difference between modal and modeless is very simple. When the user form is shown as modal, then it will prevent you to interact with the rest of the application until and unless you dismiss the user form. A modeless user form will allow the user to interact with the other parts of the graphical user interface. For example, clicking on a worksheet, entering data in a worksheet, etc. etc. We will show our user form as modal. We do not want the user to interact with the Excel worksheet when entering the data. So let's show our form. We already gave the name to the form as FRM input, so we can use that. FRM input.show. We will show this form as modal because we do not want the user to interact with the worksheet when filling up employee details. So I will leave this as it is. Now, if you run this procedure by clicking on the Run Sub User Form button, the user form is launched. I will close this and I'll go back to the module. Now let's go back to the worksheet and insert a button in the worksheet. We will assign this procedure to that button so that this user form can be run from that button. Click on the Developer tab. If the Developer tab is not visible, then see the video how to enable the Developer tab in Excel 365 for Windows. Click on Insert and under Form Controls, select the button and place it on a worksheet. Under macro name, select the procedure Launch Employee Details and click on OK. Right click on the button and click Edit Text and then delete the text. Let's type Launch. Feel free to rename the button as you would like it. Click outside to finish renaming the button. Once this is done, right click on the form so that the border is highlighted. And then drag the form and bring it on the left corner. We will keep the button here so that we can launch it from here. Now if you click on this button, see the form launches. So let's close this. In row 4, we will type the headers. The data will be saved below the headers. So here I will type first name, then we'll have last name, date of birth and gender. Let's increase the size of the column. But before you do that, right click on the button and click on Format Control. In the properties, click on Don't Move or Size with Cells. If you do not select this and if you resize the columns, then the button will also size with the column. I don't want the buttons to size. That's why I chose that option. Now I'm going to increase the size of the columns. Okay, so whatever data we will fill in the form, it will be added below row 4. Let's go back to the code. We are now ready to code our user form. Right click on the user form and click on View Code. In this screen, you will notice two drop downs. This is the first one and this is the second one. The first one is for objects. So if you click on the drop down, you will notice all your objects here. Your buttons, your combo boxes, your frame, image, labels, user form, etc. On the right side, this drop down is for event handler procedures. So if you select user form from here, then all the events for this user form will show here. Before we go ahead, let's understand what are events with respect to Visual Basic for application. An event is an action that can trigger the execution of certain code. For example, here when you click on the user form during runtime, the user form click procedure will get executed. If you remember, we have not set the gender combo box. We can do that in the form initialize event. So if you look at this drop down, there's an initialize event. Click on that. We can delete the user form click procedure. We do not need this. The initialize event is typically used to prepare a user form for use. This event occurs after the user form is loaded, but before it is shown. So in this procedure, let's initialize the combo box. I will talk about combo box in detail in one of my future videos. But in this video, we will use the .addItem property to add items to the combo box. So let's begin with cbGender, that's the name of our combo box, end with .addItem. First is male, .addItem female. There are so many other genders which are socially acceptable, but for demonstration purpose, I will just use others. .addItem others, and we are done. So let's run this, and you will notice that the drop down has now male, female, and others. Let's close this. Let's go back to the code. Now we have the 3 buttons to code for. Let's select the reset first. So I'm going to go here and I'm going to select button reset. Now what should happen when the user clicks on button reset? So if you look at the form, when the user selects reset, this and this should be reset. So let's go back. The first text box is tb fname dot text is equal to blank. tb last name dot text is equal to blank. tb dob dot text is equal to blank, and cb gender dot list index is equal to -1. While we are at this, let's go back to the user form. Let's select the combo box and we will change the style property to drop down list. The reason why I'm doing this is I do not want the user to type in the combo box. I want the user to select from the list that the combo box gives. If you set this as drop down combo, then the user will be able to type in this combo box. We do not want that. Now we already have the reset code written for the button. So instead of right clicking on FRM input and clicking on view code, you can double click on the button as well to directly access the code module. So if you double click on that, we come to the code area. So if we go back here, the next button that we want to code is save. So I'm double clicking on that and the VB automatically inserts button save underscore click. Similarly, we want for exit. When the user clicks on exit, we want the form to unload. So we can say unload me. So if I run this and if I click on exit button, the form unloads. Okay, now let's come to save. In my last video, I showed you how to enter data into the worksheet. So we will use the same thing here. So what we will do is we will find the last row in column A and then we will enter the data. Let me quickly write the code and then I will explain what the code is doing. And we are done. So let's go back. Let's understand what the code is doing. So in this section, what I'm saying is check if user has entered anything in the first name text box. So the trim will trim the text in the text box and then it will check what's the length of the entire text. If it is 0, that means there's nothing entered in the text box. And then I will show the message box, enter first name and then exit the sub. Similarly, I'm checking whether last name has been entered, date has been entered, and if the user has selected an item from the combo box. Here in this form, I've made all the 4 fields mandatory. In your user form, if you have some field which is not mandatory, then do not include that here. Right, moving on. These are the 4 variables which will hold data from those text boxes and combo box. And here I am assigning the value to the variables. I'm using date value to convert the text into a date. I've not done any error handling. So if you enter a text, let's say apple in the date field, then obviously this will give an error. So for the timing, I'm just using date value and I will be entering valid dates in the text box. In one of my future videos, I will share about an application that I created which pops up a form which looks like Windows calendar, and then you can use that in your form. Right, the next one is gender. It stores the gender value. Here I have defined the worksheet and initialized it to sheet 1. This is the last row. Here I'm finding the last row. If you are not sure what am I doing here, then I would recommend watching my previous video, which is reading writing data to a worksheet. I've explained about how to find the last row in that video. And here I'm writing to the cells in the worksheet. Finally, I'm resetting the text box and the combo box field so it is ready for the next input. And here I'm finally showing the message box that the data has been entered. So let's go back to the worksheet and let's click on the launch. So if you try to click on the save button, see what happens. It'll ask you to enter the first name. This is because of the validation code that we put on the top of our code. We are checking whether the text box is empty or not. So let's enter some details. I'll type John, last name Doe, date of birth 1st of Jan 1980. Gender male. Now if you remember, we could not test the shortcut keys. Here you can do that. So remember the shortcut key for reset was R. So if you press Alt R, see what happens. All the fields get cleared. So we'll have to type all of it again. John Doe, 1st of Jan 1980, gender male. This time I'm going to press Alt S to save the data. And I get a message box, data entered successfully. If I click on OK, the data in the text box and the combo box is reset. Let's press Alt X to close the form. And if you look at the worksheet, the data has been entered successfully. So now let's add one more employee data. This time it will be Jane Doe, date of birth 1st of Jan 1982, gender female, and you save it. Data entered successfully. If you look at the worksheet, the data is saved in the next available row. Similarly, you keep on adding new records and all the data will be added one after the other. Let's go back to the code. So here we saw how to enter the data in the worksheet using a user form. Time for a quick recap. In this video, we understood a little bit about the user form object. We learned how to create a user form to accept input from a user and then write it to a worksheet. We also learned how to customize a user form using labels, buttons, frames, and images. We also learned how to resize the user form and not to mention the important properties like Accelerator, tooltips, TabIndex, and so many other things. If you still have a question, feel free to leave a comment in the comment section below, or you can also email me on support@teamexcel.com. I also have a Facebook page. The link is in the description below. It's called Microsoft Excel-VBA. Feel free to post your question there as well. If I'm online, I will definitely help you out. Otherwise, there are other experts who would be more than happy to help you out. Quick reminder, I'll be posting 2 videos every week, one on Monday and the other on Thursday. If you like the kind of videos that I'm posting, or if you would like to extend support to this channel, then go ahead and watch a couple of videos, drop a couple of likes. Do remember to see the playlist because that is where I have put the videos in a specific order. If you follow that, it'll be easier for you to learn Visual Basic Programming from scratch. And if you still have not subscribed to this channel, go ahead and subscribe to this channel by clicking on the bell icon. And I will see you on Monday when we bring the part 2 of the user form, where we'll understand how to read the data from the worksheet, modify the data, or delete the data.